Okay, 5 big love books for you today. We have got number 1, Celeste Ng, Our Missing Hearts, comes to us from Abacus, which is Little Brown, and you will probably know Celeste Ng from Little Fires Everywhere and Everything I Never Told You, a New York bestseller writer. So this one was read by Laura, who said, I will read it. She said, so this is a beautifully written, poignant and timely story about how far people will go for those they love and what they believe in. You can tell how much this means to Ng as it translates into a powerful story filled with love and loss that stays with you for a long time. So in this story, we have 12-year-old Birdie, who I'm not going to give too much of this away, and it is, Laura has read this one and I actually haven't, but it's this 12-year-old Birdie lives with a dad who's very much kind of broken down emotionally, and he works now. So you shelving books in a library, and we're living in a world where a lot of books seem to have been banned, particularly books written by those of immigrant origin. We find out that Birdie's mum had been a poet published of Asian descent, and well, you know, in one sense you're going to have to, and the mum's not there, so you've got where the story is going to go. All writing, or most writing, no, writing in itself is a political act, and Ng is using this. She's commenting on perhaps what's happening in the United States, particularly because that's her landscape, it's where she lives. But this doesn't just happen in the West. We're surprised by it in the West because it's where democracy is supposed to be upheld. You know, this exists in China and Middle East and Russia, all sorts of countries where titles are banned. And Ng is commenting on maybe this policy of policing our reading, of banning certain cultural texts. It's an ode to librarians who defend our right to access these cultural narratives. Ng delivers a really cracking story about this power that institutions might have, and then the subversive behaviour of the librarians to sort of channel and funnel texts. It's about sort of public legacy, and then that individual private legacy that we see where Birdie's mum has in his childhood fed him her stories, fed him her culture, her love of words. And we're made to think about all that legacy left to us by artists and by authors. So in one sense, on those grounds alone, I will have to read this book, and I recommend that you do too. Number 1. Number 2, we have The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. And this one comes to us from One World. Now, this one was read by Hannah. And she said this debut novel is concerned with paranoias and the violences which can escalate all too easy. So that's kind of our main theme being explored. It's dealing with themes of gender, toxic masculinity, you've got class, you've got the personas that we create for ourselves. This is, she says, a weird and wonderful look at modern society, brimming with satire. At times it might be confronting, but it's never hopeless. It's absolutely great. So the Rabbit Hutch in this does refer to low-cost housing. We're in the US, in Indiana, and we have this main character, Blondine, who is living in a shared flat with some teenage boys, and that in itself has its frictions. But she is the original warrior and the original sort of naive, if you like. I personally, having read like 4 or 5 chapters, think that any book that references within its first 4 chapters Hildegard von Bingen and Dante and mysticism and what you believe in while you're sitting in a laundromat talking with the operator of said laundromat, while living in rural, poor Indiana, is a win. Why don't you find out? Gets my vote. So Hannah totally loved that one. A name we will all know, Seeing Other People by Diana Reid, coming to us from Ultimo Press. This was read by Harriet, and again, we all fought to get our hands on this reading copy, and Harriet won out. She says it's a stellar follow-up from the author of Love and Virtue, which came out in 2021. that's a book that, as you know, took sort of book selling by storm here in Australia. We follow Charlie, who's a queer, free-thinking, struggling actor, and in the Sydney theatre scene. We're on that scene. And she has a more responsible, grounded older sister called Eleanor. Over one summer, they experience hookups and heartbreaks while questioning who they really are. Seeing other people explores the power of sisterly bond, of betrayal, passion, and the complexities of sexual attraction. So as always, Reid is going to sort of pose these questions or paint an image of these dilemmas, and will never impose her take or what she thinks a correct answer is on the morality of the situations. And I think perhaps this might be what distinguishes her from maybe a plethora of these relationship novels, which are all valid in their own ways, but this maybe gives it that edge, that extra sort of bit of interest, because she's encouraging you to think, to sort of puts you into that situation and you go, what would I have done? What do I make of that? What would I have said to my sister? How would I have felt if she did this to me? I did that to her. Highly, highly recommended by Harriet. This one was read by Jazz. So Loving the Time of Serial Killers by Alice Thompson, and that one comes to us from Penguin. And this is hilarious because Jazz writes, is it worrying that I understood every niche true crime reference in this book? And she answers, possibly, but did I enjoy every page? Well, absolutely. So she calls this a quirky, slow burn romance with very, very witty, hilariously witty one-liners and completely lovable characters with great diversity representation, which again is one of those things that's what we're looking for, is kind of the standout, what makes it stand out for her, because there are lots of trending rom-coms, again, all equally valid, but she liked this for that inclusiveness of diversity. She says, not actually really a murder mystery novel. It's more like Emily Henry's Beach Read. This is basically the storylines. We have Phoebe, who's a PhD candidate, and she is researching and writing up a dissertation on true crime and on that writing in that genre. And, you know, she's not doing so well with it. She's sort of got this infuriatingly good-natured brother who takes up some of her time. She's packing up a house. She's mourning the death of her father, with whom it seems she had a kind of wobbly relationship. So there's a lot going on. And add to this the arrival of a new neighbour called Sam, who, despite his sort of air of being a city boy and all that respectability, there's something going on, and she becomes, you know, convinced that he's perfect serial killer material. But actually, is he something even worse than that for her, a candidate for real romance? So it falls into this trend, I think, we're seeing of the cozy crime sort of on the up, even though Jazz says it's not so much that it's crime, but it's mystery and romance. So that feel-good read, if that's what you're looking for. Last one up. Now this, I will signal to you, is a reading copy. It's coming in on the 3rd of November. It's called Tiny Uncertain Miracles by Michelle Johnston, and it's a HarperCollins imprint, 4th Estate. And her first book was called Dustfall, and I do remember reading that when it came out and found one or two similar themes to this one, and I enjoyed that one. This one was very surprising. I have to say, I truly, truly loved this book, and it's a sort of hug it to myself book. It's very unusual. It's a quirky read. It's kind of very, very graceful, very uplifting, kind of gritty, not gritty in places. It just, it's not all too saccharine. That's what I mean. It has enough grit and enough tragedy in it to keep that light and dark balance, which is so necessary. We have our main character who we follow in this one, called Marek, who's a bit hapless, and as the story progresses, you understand very quickly that he's been separated from his wife Diane, and there is all that related sort of fallout from a divorce and other traumas, which I can't really talk about because that would be too much of a spoiler. But you're fed this. She feeds you, not drip feeds, but she gives you hints to this, and it becomes very clear about halfway through the book what else is going on. Marek, having sort of fallen out of accountancy into sort of chaplaincy, is sort of booted out by the church for having strange ideas or not towing the party line, if you like. And he becomes chaplain in a rather ramshackle hospital, where he is instantly plunged into this world of the traumas of all the different patients. And we get surrounded by this nice little cosmos of very caring and very interested in each other group of people, from those who are running the shop to the nurses to the doctors. In his sort of finding his office, he notices that the kind of, and I loved this feel, that within the hospital, he's sort of put in an office down in the bowels, and also down in the bowels of this hospital, he comes across this character, Hugo, who is a researcher who seems very mysterious, very odd, who, as it turns out, believes that he has a culture of E. bacillus coli that will be, seem to be producing gold, flecks of gold. And this is alchemy. It's miraculous and it's mysterious. Hugo lives with his wife Vivian, and there are other characters who sort of flit around from the hospital. We know that Marek is on the point of sort of permanently on this point of implosion. His 4 o'clock in the morning wake-ups are always nightmarishly tragic. This wandering around the hospital, I think this is, there's a Harry Potter feel to that, weirdly, of sort of rooms opening up, and that wasn't there last time, or I went down that passageway and it wasn't there. So it gives you a kind of look at the architecture of institutions and what's built upon what. There's a mysterious cleaner in this who turns out to be quite important. And there, I think there's a little nod to Terry Pratchett's, mysterious sweeper who, full of ancient wisdom. But Johnston does this. She brings you to the edge of kind of speculative, where that can go to without ever, and the fantastical. But all the time she's kind of rooting you in this everyday tragic, with an absolute side swipe with her account of how selfishness or self-interest can get in the way of real love, but that this can be redeemed. We also learn of people, kind of the defeatist, the tiredness of healthcare workers and doctors who are up against it every day and seem to question, and how they deal with these endless questions about the tragedies that unfold in front of us, and how we sometimes create those, or we're the victim of them and we don't know we're creating them. So there's a lot in this. There's a lot to love, and there's a lot of love. There's a lot to admire, but it really comes down to how the power of goodness and of that love will always win out. An absolute gem of a novel. There you are. That's my final say on those 5 wonderful ones. Happy reading.